going to start with the beginning of Western art, the Renaissance. There was art before, of course. There's Egyptian art, Persian art, beautiful. But for purposes of training people to look at paintings in a different way, from the aspect of how painters look at paintings, the attributes of art, I thought that the Renaissance would be the most likely place to start. Their subject matter was religion, mythology, war, and portraits of the rich and the powerful. This is early Renaissance. The painter is Cimabue. If you notice, there's very little knowledge about proportion, perspective, but balance is what they were achieving right off. This happens to be symmetrically balanced, as equal on both sides. Notice that there are a few colors. They used a lot of sienna and natural minerals that were available. These figures were stiff. The artist that most art students turn to with admiration is Giotto. And this painting is attributed to Giotto. This is Giotto's work, where the figures are fluent and they're more proportionate. That's a detail of this painting, where the pose is weighted more realistically. And this is another Giotto, and this is a detail of Giotto. It could be done today. It's so contemporary, and this is why art students loved his work. I really like to encourage people who are interested in art to develop their own point of view and not be concerned about not agreeing with the critics. That doesn't mean you should hold fast to your opinions, stay open, but I think you should encourage yourself to say, I like this, I don't, I believe this, I don't. Now here is a complicated composition. Essentially, Giotto has an overall composition. Doesn't seem to be a split. There's a split in space where this is in a different space. These figures are not that far away from these frontal figures. They're not in the far distance. They're close. And so when I look at this, I couldn't help but think of the abstract expressionists from the 1940s and 50s. Notice again that the palette is narrow. There's dark blue and various shades of orange and some grays, and that's it. Just imagine cutting off this corner, and saying this is the painting. There are abstract passages. What is this, a mountain? Is this a fabric store where sheer fabric is being draped around? It's completely abstract. So the emergence of abstraction starts very early in Western painting. And then, as I already said, these figures could be painted today by a contemporary artist. He has pose, he has proportion, weight, and expression. Leonardo da Vinci, his brilliance was only exceeded by his curiosity. He was more curious about the world, and as a matter of fact got him into trouble with his artwork, because he left pieces undone and went off for other interests. Now here he is talking about the ideal proportion of the human form. The figure is usually the length of 7 heads. This is ideal. Here he is interested in anatomy and in human life, and here he's interested in physiology, war weapons, a chariot with scythes. And here is one of the paintings. When I looked at it, I thought, it's not making any sense to me. And then I realized that this section, these figures, are incomplete. He never finished the painting. And it's all in various tones of sienna. And here's Leonardo. He was in his early 30s. And he knows the construction of the head, but not like he knew it here many years later when he was in his 60s, which brings me, especially at this stage of my life, to want to point out to you that there are artists who never stop developing, and there are artists who peak and never reach that peak again. And at what stage of their life did they make the piece? At what stage did he paint Mona Lisa? He was in his 60s, and the lady with an ermine, he was in his 30s. Look at the way he handles the background. I don't know whether you could see it on the screen, but this background has different tones, warmer tones, like from the hair. These tones are in here on my screen. One of the tricks of getting engaged with the painting that you're looking at is to compare both sides of the canvas and see how the artist changes the color to bring one side of it a little closer to the viewer. This side is colder. He's using blues and greens in here. See this blue? You see, I just saw this for the first time. You never stop learning by looking. I think this blue is undercoating this black. And I think this warm brown that is in the hair, the reddish brown, is undercoating this black. With Mona Lisa, he gives you a world. He doesn't just give you depth, but he gives you a landscape. How many have seen the Mona Lisa? Were you surprised at how little it was? Right, that's the big shock of how little it is, because it is so enormous in its impression. Raphael, he glorifies the female form. Nudity and sexuality were veiled. If you're talking about mythology, that's all right to have a nude, but you don't talk about sexuality. Again, I want you to notice that how limited the palette is. When I taught studio classes, I would say to beginners, just put 3 colors on your palette and see how far you can go with them. And here's the most famous painting of the Renaissance. It's the School of Athens by Raphael. You have figures from Aristotle to Plato to Sophocles to Michelangelo. Raphael put himself in there. But the important part of this painting for us to delight in is, my God, how hard he worked with the perspective and the architecture. If you follow the tiles in the floor and you keep going straight up, you will find the point where he does, might be, well, it's approximately here, and then you would come down with the other tiles. They actually worked it out like a blueprint, mathematically. And look at the details of this building, where he includes all the sculptures, all the carvings, all the arches, and the figures. It's an enormous undertaking.